Yeah, besides some of the who I am, I also add that we are working together with a group of people to launch a small research network called Enough. Maybe we'll talk of that later. I would try to also can we turn off the light, because I have a number of pictures which this light. Sorry for that, but if not, we continue like this. Okay, maybe great. Thank you. Perfect. So I would like to try to have some working hypothesis that actions by individuals to achieve sufficiency and also efficiency. We are talking in these days also a lot of personal responsibility. I agree with that, but I also think that only if we create the enabling conditions, individuals can take action. And in particular, in buildings, these actions for sufficiency and efficiency are connected to enabling conditions in buildings and enabling conditions in the district or the city. And I will touch some couple of boundary conditions that tell us that we must use energy sufficiency, but I have also a question that this is a must, is a constraint, but I'm wondering if it can also be a pleasure. So, boundary condition, context. Well, there is in the public discourse often this idea that we are making a lot of progress, we are decarbonizing, and maybe that's not as easy as sometimes we say. So these are data from British Petroleum, 2000, 2010, 2016. Yes, we see renewables growing, but we see oil, coal, and natural gas growing much more in the last 15 years than the renewables. So in fact, what's going on in these 15 years that we are adding new energy in the form of fossil and some energy in the form of renewables, but as this paper summarized, global energy growth is outpacing decarbonization, unfortunately. And if we look at other data from International Energy Agency, rate of electricity demand in buildings increased 5 times faster than improvements in the carbon intensity of the power sector. So clearly, the boundary condition tells us that we have to move. We have seen this picture in the last days. So we're doing much better in the last 5 years, and then the curve of energy use is going up. This primary energy, it says this Eurostat statistic. Just to continue on the discussion on key indicators, is this total primary energy or non-renewable primary energy? I know it is total from the definitions somewhere in the Eurostat pages, but my question is, may we use one set of concepts and languages? For example, may we see that we try to describe our work and also the legislation work in using exactly the concepts and names in the standards we have been developing. This is there is a huge input in these international standards from Europe, so I think we should take profit of that. So we can then describe our scenarios very clearly. I want to present a scenario which tries to respond to that boundary condition. This is called low energy demand scenario. It is a scenario which says, okay, we can do decarbonization and stay under 1.5 degree of climate disruption without using unproven negative emission technologies if we reduce demand by 30% at 2050 at world level, which means obviously that Europe and other developed countries have to do much more than that. So the other boundary condition is that we have winter and we have summer, and summer is getting a really hard problem. It's getting to be more and more a difficult problem to achieve comfort in buildings and cities. We have data showing that even if we do something and we start reducing demand and decarbonizing the climate in cities, the temperature will still go up, and if we don't do nothing, it can go up 5 degrees in average. So we could have heat waves like the one of 2003 every year in the worst scenario. So the analysis in the paper, and I will not touch all these interactions. So what we try to do is to find correlations between what we do in buildings, what we want to achieve in buildings, sufficiency actions in buildings, and what happens in the city. So we might want to do summer night ventilation and use ceiling fans for summer comfort rather than doing massive air conditioning. We might want to have summer night ventilation again. We want adequate square meters per capita floor space, that has been discussed these days. Have sufficient mobility modes starting from my building. Have line drying and water savings. For these in the buildings, I need, if I want to do night ventilation, I need a silent neighbor, clean air around me. I need air temperature low enough that the cooling effect will be there. If I want to reduce my individual space, I need pleasant outdoor common spaces, and so on. So what we try to show, and that's what will be the rest of the presentation, cities are not developing that conditions at the moment, but they have the potentiality to offer those conditions. Car-free residential districts, limitation of speed to 30 kilometers per hour, cyclable districts, green spaces for allowing enjoying the city, access to spaces for alternative travel modes, and legislation could give me the possibility to do passive cooling if adequate temperature and humidity set points are chosen and described in legislation and maybe in district definition. If I have a mandatory commitment to increase the green spaces, the white surfaces in the city, and so on. So we can try to see so one of or two of those points in detail. So this issue of doing passive cooling and in the building and with the aid of the district is strictly related to how we define comfort in the building. We know from standards, from a lot of interviews, that air velocity is the main determinant of comfort in summer, according to standards, according to the possibility to calculate that. Well, this seems to be an old technology, how to say, a constraint going back in the past. Maybe not. This is the most efficient ceiling fan in the Energy Star classification. It has been designed by experts who design airplanes. It has an accurate mechanical balancing of the blades, so it's very silent. It has LED, it has sensors to turn it on and off. You can control it with your smartphone, so it's a today technology. Humidity has a low effect on comfort. We know that from, for example, the database we recently published with AZEB, with interviews in real buildings all over the world. We got even an award for this paper. The results are summarized in this calculation tool available on internet. So we can see 20% humidity, 27 is the temperature, velocity 0.6 meters per second. We are in category 2-1 of comfort, so we are in comfort. 80% humidity, we are still in comfort. So we have a range between 20 and 80 where we can remain in comfort. But humidity control at 50% costs a lot of energy, which is something which is often taken as the standard where to go. So sorry, 50% is not even considered here. Here I'm comparing a reference case where we condition at 60% relative humidity, 26-degree operative temperature and no velocity. It's a very good building. So the energy need for cooling is already very low. The energy need for dehumidification is this one. If we change we go to case 2 where we have higher velocity, so higher temperature, and we are still in comfort, and higher humidity, slightly higher humidity. We cut in half both the energy need for cooling and the energy need for dehumidification, just changing the way we run the building. But to do this, okay, we have to design the building, and this is a building presented in our book of the International Energy Agency, a building where you can do cross ventilation, where you have ceiling fans, and to do this you need the city. This district is a residential district where there is cross ventilation for doing night ventilation, and there are no cars. Interviews with people show that they are happy. You need to do some other things to do night ventilation, and again they require very sophisticated technology like mosquito nets, which we are doing in a retrofit in Milano. We are applying these mosquito nets around the balconies, so people have an outdoor space where to stay in the evening, fresh air. It's very easy, but you have to plan for it when you design the building or you retrofit the building, so that everyone will have this facility easily, no hassle, no problem to have it. And obviously you need a district where outside is fresh, outside is clean, outside is not noisy. This, by the way, is the River Seine in Paris, and that's the new pedestrian path and green path, which will be expanded enormously in the next years with a new green area between Tour Eiffel and Trocadero. And obviously you need to include in your architecture of the building some other things for summer. These are traditional solar protection, anti-intrusion, very bad, ugly grills. These are traditional in the south of Europe. And that's what we are doing, in fact. This is the new district in Milano. And in very hot countries like Switzerland, you have regulation for winter, and you have regulation for summer. You install active air conditioning systems only after verification that the building fabric has been done right, and that you have thermal mass, external insulation, solar protections, and possibility for night ventilation. So it can be done to go back to an architecture that allows us to be sufficient. Okay, we'll not go into the details, but what I'm saying is that collectively a community can decide to move towards a situation where we enable citizens to do sensible choices in the way they run and live in a building. And then you have also to maybe control. In Zurich, the public utility knows your profile of consumption, so it can identify buildings which have a high peak power demand in summer and compare with the permits for installation of air conditioning. So if you have a peak power demand and no permit, you get control. But obviously we can't do that for our cities. This in the south of Europe and Spain, it's common to shade the streets, and again this allows outdoor spaces, comfortable, allows a reduction of the entire of the temperature in the city. We can do something about insulation around the body. This is a thing. And we can do green areas, and that's probably the conclusion. The city of Milano says, okay, we have a problem with temperature, we need 3 million trees. This is the largest new area that will be done in the next 10 years. It will contain 15,000 trees. So we are lagging behind many other cities for the amount of green space. We are getting more and more tropical nights. Are these green areas planned sufficient? I guess not, unfortunately. So my guess is that to cool the city, we need to move much faster. We need green and cool surfaces which are faster to produce than trees, unfortunately. And to do this, we need space. So cars are now competing with the possibility to cool down the cities. And cars are competing with having clean air and having silent nights. I also want to challenge the fact that changing the motor will change this situation. Limiting ourselves to PM10 and PM2.5, research shows that changing the motor changes absolutely nothing, because those emissions of particles are coming from tires, brakes, and resuspension from the asphalt. So, and an electric vehicle weighs 500 kilos more than the analogous with an internal combustion engine. So the result is you get almost the same emissions in terms of PM emissions. So the issue is the number and weight of cars in the city if we want to clean the air. And there is someone trying to do it, Oslo. Paris to me is an incredible example of how you change a city in 5 years. Now it's work everywhere. They're changing the 10 main squares, reducing the amount of space given to cars of at least 50% in each of the largest squares. They are reducing velocity to 30% in most of the 30 kilometers per hour in most of the city. This is Place de la Bastille. All this space was for cars. The center will be green area connected to the canal. At the sides you have new walkable spaces. Time is up. Why Paris will be the first post-car metropolis is the title in the Financial Times. We need our infrastructure, which Paris is building for parking bikes, for transporting bikes, and we need some other things for water saving or for line drying. Line drying, it's traditional in Italy. It can be done in spaces designed for this. I'm fascinated by this space designed by Gaudi in Butlow House. This was a space for services and for line drying. So the idea is that, well, there are a number of people working on this transformation of the cities, and I think that that transformation, far from being a constraint, a bad thing, will be something that a number of people will enjoy, especially those ones. I had some other things on nomenclature and progressive terrace, which are in the paper, and we don't have time now for that, but maybe in the questions. Or thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we got any questions from the audience?
Yes, Andrew. Thank you very much for a very meaningful and rich presentation with lots of ideas. I just had one question about the thermal comfort through air. Based on some of the work that we've been doing in India, we realized that since the thermal mass of air is so much lesser than water, we've realized that the amount of air movement you'd have to do to be able to pick up a certain amount of heat from the body. Even the ASHRAE chart shows how if the mean radiant temperature is controlled, your body's loss through radiation is far greater than what convection or what perspiration could ever achieve. And there is a big movement in India, at least, to start looking at draining of heat from structures rather than pumping of heat out of structures. So looking at the building envelope as basically a storage battery of heat, and we should drain it rather than pump it.
Okay.
So there's a difference, right? Like if you want to empty a tank of water, and if you had an electric pump versus a tap, you would use a tap to drain it. So we use a pump to drain a tank, which is the most inefficient way to actually empty something out. So I was wondering, what is the potential you think for structure cooling on rooftops, at least for 3 to 4 story buildings, where the draining of heat through water can really help thermal comfort at the lowest energy, at least based on some of the things that we...
I think there is no contradiction between the passive technologies you want to use to drain passively energy out of the window rather than pumping it out with air conditioning, with compression air conditioning, and the idea that once you have lowered the operative temperature, which is an average of air and surface temperature, it's choosing the combination. But a large part of this combination can be air movement, the air movement in the room. I mean, the velocity of air on your skin, whichever, unless the air temperature is too high, you will get a cooling effect on your air, dehumidification effect on your air. You bring out the humidity which is close to your skin, sorry. So I don't see a contradiction, and the data we have on the correction, on the fact that you can increase temperature if you increase air velocity and still remain in comfort. These are proven by all the interviews we have done, and many of them come from countries like India. So I don't see this contradiction. We might cool down the structure, but the amount of cooling, even passive cooling, that we need is a little lower if we use also air velocity within the environment.
Just the only reason why I mention this is because, at least based on our very high level modeling, we realized that the room, the part that is the warmest is actually the ceiling, and usually ceiling fans are placed there. So what they actually do is, at least in hot nights in Mumbai, humid nights in Mumbai, because the outside air is not so much cooler, and if you have this warm air that is being pushed out, you're actually pressurizing the house with the warm air from the top, because that's where the warmest air in the house is. and the ceiling fan actually throws that onto the occupant. So after a while, after a certain speed, you get no relief from a fan. And what happens is, because of the pressurization, you can't even bring outside air through the house. So what a lot of people are talking about is actually exhaust fans to pull air through to create negative pressure, especially if the air outside is in the night cooler than. So that might be something interesting to look at, rather than looking at positive pressure, looking at.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, obviously I start with the idea that we are doing the external insulation well, and so that we reduce the heat coming in. But obviously, if you are under a hot roof, then certainly you have a problem. So I'm thinking of European cities where already we have high-rise buildings and the top level should be insulated, which is not always the case. If you have low-rise and non-insulated roofs, then obviously that should be addressed first. But the idea of drawing air and so putting together the air velocity and the intake of fresh air from outside is perfect if the geometry of the building allows that.
And also if the window design allows it.
And the window design allows that.
Because you could easily have a window that just opens out,
Yeah.
and there's not an airflow that's going to be circulated, going out from a lower and incoming from a higher, and therefore have a circulation of some sort. And I think the fans would help that circulation if the window design was correct, and not just occasionally the window just opening and closing.
Time for one more short question.
Yeah, I just had a question about again cooling, because you showed this graph of the comfort and with the temperature and there's also then heat waves. With passive cooling, at some point you still can't combat the effect of heat waves, and they actually, so this is actually some work I do part with them. There's the Lancet climate countdown, and we look a bit at the exposure of people to heat waves, and after a certain level it just becomes a serious health risk. So what do you think could be a solution to address those few days of the year where no amount of passive cooling is going to protect people, especially like older, vulnerable people, from the effects of extreme heat waves, which are going to become more and more frequent?
I'm not saying that we will get away from using any compression cooling. I'm saying that if we do this, the amount of cooling required, active cooling required, will be much less. Maybe we can concentrate that where it's actually more needed. But the transformation of the city means also, Paris is making a map of places where in summer you can stay cool, common places like parks. So you can have also, let's say, common places which are for the people who can't afford or don't have a nice and well-insulated building. They might have an alternative for at least a large part of the day where to cool down. So I think this idea of working at the building and the city level could help also for this, unfortunately, more frequent hot spells.
Okay, thank you, Lorenzo. Sorry to have to wait in a break. We move on with the track on not looking purely at building level, but at district level, and for that we also need modeling tools. So Fatema is going to introduce